Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on CBS News. I'm Tony DeCopo.
And I'm Lilia Luciano. Donald Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, is testifying today in the former president's criminal trial in New York City. Cohen, you tell them, Tony.
I was going to jump in. Cohen paid $130,000 to adult film actor Stormy Daniels. That much not in dispute. This was just before the 2016 election. Here's the key part. Prosecutors are alleging that he did it at Donald Trump's direction. The defense could question Cohen's credibility on that point, though, as a witness overall, because, of course, he previously pleaded guilty to lying to Congress and then served a little more than a year in federal prison.
Trump addressed reporters outside the courtroom this morning and denied any wrongdoing. He also criticized President Biden, calling him, quote, the worst president in the history of the United States of America. For more, I want to bring in CBS News investigative reporter Graham Cates and CBS News campaign reporter and attorney Katrina Kaufman. Katrina, let's start with you. So Michael Cohen testified that he referred to Trump as his boss. This isn't the first time that the jury has heard this. What's the significance of the wording?
So we also heard this come up a lot when David Pecker was on the stand. He's the former publisher of the National Enquirer, and he constantly referred to Trump as the boss, as does Michael Cohen. And I think the prosecution wants to both show that he's being referred to as the same name by everyone, and the fact that they're calling him the boss also indicates that he's really the one who's in charge of all of this, that people are turning to as these events are transpiring.
Graham, over to you now. What did Cohen tell the court about David Pecker, the former National Enquirer publisher who took the stand? Pecker took the stand earlier. What do we know? What did Cohen have to say?
For the second time, the jury got to hear a person talk about this meeting in 2015 between Donald Trump, David Pecker, and Michael Cohen. They previously heard Pecker talk about it. Now they heard Cohen talk about it. And at this meeting, this is when supposedly they hatched this scheme to catch and kill negative stories about Trump, and also for the National Enquirer to make positive stories about Trump and also negative stories about Trump's opponents. Cohen actually talked about a couple of those stories. He talked about reviewing before it was published a story that implied Ted Cruz's father was involved in JFK's assassination. I saw Senator J.D. Vance, who was in the courtroom today, kind of laughing about that as Cohen was describing it. And this is kind of, again, this is the second time the jury has heard this, and it's the same story, but now through Cohen's words as opposed to through Pecker's.
Katrina, Michael Cohen detailed contacting Trump's bodyguard to see if he could speak to Trump about a payment to Karen McDougal. What did he testify happened there?
So this interaction was that Michael Cohen had heard from David Pecker and then Dylan Howard, who's the former editor-in-chief of the National Enquirer, that Karen McDougal was shopping around her story. And he said that he had gone to former President Trump and told him about it. And apparently Trump's initial reaction was that she was really beautiful, but then he also said that he didn't want the story to get out. So the reason that Michael Cohen contacted Trump's bodyguard is that was a way for him to get in touch with Trump. At that time, he wanted to update him that Dylan Howard was going to be meeting with Karen McDougal about this story. And so the interaction was he was trying to find out if Trump was available to speak. And this was really a way of showing how Cohen was keeping Trump in the loop as this was going on. He was always checking in with him, letting him know what was happening with these agreements, because the fact is that a lot of the actual communications that we have records of are between Cohen, Pecker, Howard, but there's not direct text necessarily tying this to Donald Trump. So the prosecution is trying to show that Cohen was always going to Trump and briefing him about what was going on.
So, Katrina, correct me if I'm wrong here. It feels like all these details boil down to Michael Cohen is the linchpin witness for the prosecution because he's the only one that can get them all the way to the level of this being a crime, that Donald Trump was actually the one directing him to make these payments and then was also the one falsifying the business records. So I have that right. This is the witness that really matters.
That's absolutely true, because Michael Cohen was privy to certain conversations that directly tie Donald Trump to all of this. Although at the same time, the prosecution has really been building this case and corroborating his story through all of these witnesses that we've been seeing, these contracts, documents, but Michael Cohen can really tell us what happened in certain key meetings with Donald Trump that were behind the scenes that really only he was privy to.
Graham, as you've followed all the details of this case, I wonder where intention comes up. I know we've talked a lot about the idea that this is a case about election interference, that the crimes that were allegedly committed were committed to control the outcome of the election. Did you hear any of that happen today? And moving forward, when do you expect that to come up?
Some of the last testimony before they broke for lunch today was about Trump's reaction to finding out that Stormy Daniels was shopping her story in the wake of the famous Access Hollywood video. And what Cohen hit home was that what Trump was concerned about was how that story would impact the election and voters. And he described Trump being very concerned for his campaign, and Cohen described himself being very concerned for the campaign, and Trump calling him while he knew that Cohen was on vacation with his family in London and saying, we've got to take care of this. And then also he described Trump, and there's been two sides to how they've described Trump throughout this, which is concerned about his campaign, but also a micromanager of his finances. He also described Trump saying, well, maybe we can get this deal with her, but push the payment until after the election when it doesn't matter, so that maybe we don't have to make the payment at all. And that's kind of at the core of where Cohen is bringing us to this part of Trump that we haven't gotten to hear from yet from someone like Keith Davidson, Stormy Daniels' lawyer. Although they had said they were worried about that same thing.
Hey, guys, intriguing wrap-up question here. As I see the barricades, and you mentioned the break for lunch, what do folks do for lunch? Do they go out? Are they ordering in? Can delivery people even get in? What do we know?
Well, a great thing is that this is right by Chinatown, where there's a lot of really fast, really inexpensive places to grab a bite in like 5 minutes and then run back through all the security to get back in the courthouse.
So Donald Trump's having Chinese food for lunch, or he's bringing his own? Do we know?
Oh, you meant Trump? Oh. Yeah, I've seen some catering services come in, although I don't know exactly what they're ordering for him.
Super interesting to me. What is the judge eating? What are the lawyers eating?
What
Who's fueling what? Peanut butter sandwiches? Is it peanut-free environment? I honestly, when you say break for lunch, I want to know all about it. But to be covered in a future segment, I guess.
Court foodie experts. So.
Now you know what questions to ask. Hard-hitting ones. Katrina, Graham, thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.